Locked On Spartans, your daily podcast on the Michigan State Spartans, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Locked on Spartans Nation, how on earth are you doing? I won't even ask how you're doing, actually, because I know you're doing great. Because if you're watching on YouTube, if I can point in the right direction, if you're watching on YouTube, you're looking at one of the most loved beat writers in Michigan State sports history. If you're listening, you're going to hear his voice pretty soon. But before we get to that, hey, today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline, where the game starts. Folks, this is a massive one. We got Joe Rexrode on the show here today to talk about John L. Smith. But before going any further, Joe, how on earth you doing, man? You doing okay?
I'm doing good. That's a nice intro, Matt. It's great to see you. But no one gives a shit about the old beat writer. Come on, man. Come on. No one even remembers who I am.
What? Any time MSU is, their name pops up on Selection Sunday. How long have you been gone from East Lansing? Like you've been gone for how many years? And I think like people still counting you for kickoff times, tip-off times.
True. I still do get the tip-off time tweets. You're right. It's amazing, actually, like how many people, because like when I left, so I left 6 years ago, and I figured like, I mean, everyone like is going to unfollow me. It's actually amazing how many people didn't, but it's like, dude, are you not sick of freaking Nashville Predators tweets yet? Like, I hope you've at least muted me for the most part, but I do get those. I like how now it's like Colton, of course, who does an awesome job for us at The Athletic, cover Michigan State. I like now what he's the height weight guy now, right?
Oh yeah, that height, weight, and neon too, and Sparrow Pizza. I think is his holy trinity right there. Yeah, he's got a lot of bases covered.
Yeah. Arguing with the new old man yelling at Cloud, Graham Couch on the
exactly.
Booth.
Yeah, you're just so talented though. Like even like a guy like me that couldn't give two craps about National Predators hockey. You write such compelling tweets about it that it's like, yeah, you know what? Maybe I do care about this team actually. So good to see.
Wow, look at the way he weaved forecheck into that tweet. That's just
just chef's kiss, just beautiful. Beautiful. Yeah. Speaking of the opposite of beautiful, actually, we're going to talk about the John L. Smith era at Michigan State. This is something that we started 2-3 weeks ago, the Memory Lane series, aka it's the off season and there's not a lot to talk about, but we're going to make something to talk about here. And so, the first Memory Lane series, me and Carter Elliott talked about the 2019 Final Four team. So, and we'll talk about players in the future, or like today, coaches, because listen, there's coaching regimes and coaches that don't work out in college football all the time. But then there's like the John L. Smith era. And I think that, and I think it helps that, the decade after him really worked out well, is that now we can look back and laugh at this a little bit. But, it's not going to be all crapping on him, yada, yada, yada. What was your first impression of the John L. Smith era? Actually, what am I doing here? What were your credentials back in this era? Like, what was your role in the Lansing area media before we get to John L. Smith? And yeah.
So let's see. So when John L. was hired, I was on the sports desk as a sports, like sports copy editor, basically at the Lansing State Journal. Gotcha. So that would have been, like I remember, like I remember that day. In fact, I don't remember if I wrote the headline or not. I don't want to take credit for it if I didn't, but I remember I was on the desk that day. And when John L. was hired, if you remember, it was like Louisville was in a bowl game. Yeah. And so this is what, like the end of 2002 / beginning of 2003. So players are on the sidelines with their massive like cell phones with like, whatever, I mean, some people had a flip phone if they were really fancy, but they're on the sideline, like talking to people on their cell phone because the report came out that John L. Smith was being hired by Michigan State. But I remember, the next day at the Lansing State Journal, of course, back then it was like, ooh, what's going to be in the paper the next day, everybody?
Yeah, that's right.
The headline was huge. John L. Who? ?
Okay.
Which Ron Mason was very pissed about. I remember that, but I can't honestly. It may have been Barry Keel or Jeff Rudnick or Rico Cooney or Neil Kepke. It would have been one of those people, or Vince, Brent Neal, Vince. I just want to cover all the bases on who may have written that headline. Not that it's
Sure.
like the greatest headline ever written, but it was funny. And so I remember that, and I remember. So I wasn't on the beat. Now, January of 2003, Jack Ebbling retired. He had been to Lansing State Journal forever. Jack, a mentor of mine. I mean, I would say probably a lot more Michigan State fans know Jack, I would think. And I mean, he covered them forever. He had been columnist and beat writer at the Lansing State Journal. He retired. So in January of 2003, I mean, again, this is how it works in this business. Like, I mean, luck is a huge part of it. Basically, they were like, shit, there's no one else to cover it right now. Rexrode, you're on the beat for the rest of hoop season. Nice. So I covered that. Now, I had covered with Jack like the championship team with Cleves and Saban and at the State News in the 90s. But then now this is back on the beat, interim basis. So that was an Elite Eight team, a surprise Elite Eight team for Izzo, Alan Anderson, Chris Hill, et cetera, Calvin Torbert,
Gotcha.
Paul Davis, Mo Ager as freshmen. But then also John L. Spring. So basically, I was the beat writer, and I bribed people in the summer to give me the full-time job after being on an interim basis. And so I covered John L's whole tenure basically as a beat writer. And my goodness, what a ride it was.
Can't have a better person on the line to talk about this with, because like I only have vague memories of John L. Smith. Like, so, one of my earliest memories of MSU fanhood was actually before John L. Smith even happened. It was leaving the stadium. I think it was a night game against Wisconsin, the last year of the Bobby Williams era, and there were a few students at the top of the lower bowl as we're walking the parking lot chanting, "Fire Bobby!" And now, of course, John L. Smith now gets hired. And, okay, my next question was this considered like a good home run hire at the time? Because he did take Louisville to 5 straight bowl games, back-to-back Conference USA conference titles. But I think I know that answer after the headline, John L. Who? Like, what was the just general reaction amongst the fan base or the media when John L. Smith was named to be the guy here?
Well, see, I think, Matt, you just uncovered something, like at the LSJ, like we should have known better who he was. I mean, he had just beaten Florida State that year. He was pretty good. And we did. But it was not a widely renowned hire. I do remember also that day, or it could have been the next day in the Lansing State Journal. Pat Forty at the time was working at the Louisville Courier-Journal, and he wrote a column basically like for Michigan State fans why you should be excited about John L. Smith. And no, I mean, he had done well at Louisville.
Right.
I mean, really, it wasn't like some totally wacky, terrible hire. But, for example, during the process, Marvin Lewis had come in. And so there was, Marvin Lewis. There was excitement.
Okay.
Now it's Marvin Lewis in 2002, had not yet been an NFL head coach. And that's the problem was that's where he was headed, was being an NFL head coach, is what he got. But they flirted with him. They got him in for an interview. Man, I feel bad right now because off the top of my head, I don't recall. Gosh, there were bigger names that were being bandied about as potential. And I wish I remembered better. Marvin Lewis was the big one where it was like, ooh, whoa, what a hire that would be. Yeah. And, there was also, as there every time with any, how it is with the college coach, there's always like people who have ties that people want. I do remember that Pat Shurmur was a name, that definitely people were talking about. Now, he was a bigger, I think a more prominent and discussed name the next time around when D'Antonio got hired. But no, no one was especially excited by the hire. But I think for the most part, it was like, well, look, keep an open mind. I mean, Ron Mason had kind of gone, on his own to kind of make this choice. And I'd say it was lukewarm would probably be the best description.
Okay.
You had to do one word.
And another good one word to use for John L. Smith, at least, as we look back on him, is I think quirky is safe to say. And hey, that's for better or for worse. But what were your first impressions of him, whether it be like a press conference or maybe a one-on-one interaction, or just what was your kind of just vibe of him right off the top of his tenure?
Oh, yeah. I mean, he was He was wacky, and it was fun.
Okay.
It really, I mean, I really enjoyed it. I mean, you never knew with these press conferences what might happen. And for the most part, he was good to cover. I mean, early, and we can get to the end when it got really tough for me in particular. But again, I'll take some ownership of that. But yeah, no, he was. So I think back to a win at Notre Dame his first year. You've been to that theater where they have their pressers at Notre Dame, like the opposing. You know what I'm talking about?
I've seen pictures of it. Yes, yeah.
So it's it's a big room, and it doesn't. I guess the room doesn't matter that much, but I'm envisioning this. I was standing to the side, which I like to do a lot, and kind of writing and waiting for him to come in. And a lot of, it was a pretty packed press conference. And the week before, they had lost to Louisiana Tech. So his second game was a really ugly loss to La Tech. Yeah. And I remember, like, I wrote something about, like, their penalties and just, like, the general sloppiness and sort of, like, commentary maybe on coaching. So they beat Notre Dame, this huge win at Notre Dame Stadium, which at that time, that was like Michigan State just did that every year. It didn't matter what the teams were. Michigan State's going to win at Notre Dame, right? So I don't remember. I guess I saw him coming in, but then I turned waiting for him to go up to the podium. I get absolutely two hands shoved in my back. My neck snaps back. And I'm like, what? And like the whole room's laughing. And like John L. had just given me this huge shove. And that was the first time I recall there were other situations. He would hug Jamel Hill sometimes. I think he may have faux slapped Dave Burkett in the face at one point. Certainly. Actually, I should amend that because that was the third game. The first game, of course, if you remember, Jeff Smoker was back that year. A huge part of this Big Ten Coach of the Year debut for John L. Smith was that Jeff Smoker, had cleaned himself up, had gotten back on the team, and I mean he had a great year in that offense. But the first game, they won, and Smoker is talking. And John O comes in and just slaps him in the face. I mean, I'm sure you can find on YouTube. I mean, he absolutely a loud to the point where if you watch that video, it's got to be out there. Like the initial, I'll never forget it, reaction of Smoker was like what you would expect from being slapped in the face, like like startled and then like laugh about it. It's like, dude, you just slapped him in the this is a college kid. What are you doing? But it was fun. I mean, it really was. And for the most part, John L. would talk about things. I think he was pretty good with media. And you just never knew what kind of wacky, stuff you might get out of him on a given day. Obviously, much more likely to have the fun stuff after wins.
Sure, of course. And like a lot of wins in that first season, too. And I want to get to that in a hot second. But unfortunately, Joe, I just got to say goodbye to you for about 45 to 60 seconds right here. As I got to talk to the fine people about BetOnline.net. That's right, with NBA playoffs heating up. We're in the Western Conference Finals, Eastern Conference Finals. We got the PGA Championship. Colin Morikawa is going to win. Put some money on that. Our partners at BetOnline continue to be the number one source for all your sports betting needs and info in this lovely sports season we are in. Find all the latest odds, news, sports developments, including this year's basketball playoffs, Major League Baseball scores, fights, and even next season's NFL futures at BetOnline. Your continued source for all your sports wagering information from live betting to playoffs, esports, and more. So, hey, head to the website today, use your mobile device, learn more about the trends in action. That's at BetOnline, where the game starts. And as we welcome the one, the only, Joe Rexrode back to the program. Hey, just want to thank you all for making Locked On Spartans your first listen every single day. First season, 8-4. We're going bowling. This is great. Hindsight's 2020. Obviously, we know this all didn't work out, but after 1 year, is the consensus among Spartan Nation and the media like, hey, nice, this is going to work out? Or with Jeff Smoker graduating, like, could you see things kind of maybe flash in the panty, if you will? What was it like back in the day?
Well, first of all, I do have to really quick go back to another one of my favorite moments of his first season when they won at Illinois to get bowl eligibility. And Todd Schultz, my buddy, who was my coworker, he was the columnist at the Atlanta State Journal at the time, not the former quarterback, Todd Schultz. They spell their last names differently. I swear, people would still always write them letters and be like, how come a former MSU quarterback is going to rip the team? Why don't you have some Spartan blood in your, it's like, come on, man. Anyway, so Todd asked John L about bowl eligibility, and John L was just like, baloney. I don't know why. I just loved it. Like, I think that was like the first line of his column, baloney. Like, it's just stuff like that. You got to love it. I would say, so the season ended and they lost to Nebraska. It's a really ugly game, actually. That was Bo Pelini. I mean, you had like Richie Incognito, like choking Greg Taplin on the field. Dude, there's some weird crap going on. Right. Okay. You know what I'm talking about?
Didn't Drew Stanton get injured that game too on special teams? Like
that's what I was getting to.
Excuse me.
Yeah, no, it's fine. But that was a very valid criticism of John L. Was like, okay, yes, Drew Stanton is a good football player. Yeah, he could have played linebacker. But, he might be your next QB, and you've got him covering punts, dude. And, yes, he tore his ACL in the freaking bowl game. So think about that now. Like, you got a guy with a potential NFL future. Like, everybody's out on the bowl games. Back then, by golly, we played our quarterbacks on punt, But that was a valid criticism of John L. I will tell you that the first year, the offense – it's not like the spread was new, of course. Now, it wasn't really, if you go Big Ten history, it was that Joe Tiller team at Purdue in the late 90s that really brought it, basketball on grass. And, people struggle with it. I mean, I still remember, this is how old I am. Oh, my God, what the hell is a bubble screen? But it was effective. And Tiller and John L. had cross-path. Like, they were very much part of that same kind of West upper Northwest, like family of, like a lot of the same, like coaching colleagues. And that offense was really effective. And yes, Jeff Smoker certainly had a lot to do with it, but it was a fun, that team, they really, they gave Michigan a run. They gave Ohio State. It was immediately some competitive games. Now you get that first year coach bump, but then they recruited off it. They had a good 04, at least a well-regarded 04 recruiting class. So, gotcha. I was intrigued, and I thought he had a chance. And I'll tell you what, I don't know how much things change from this, but what happened then in 04 is that they kind of really leaned in on the spread option stuff, on the read option with Drew Stanton eventually. And they had something for a while. They had something going into 05. They just, the defensive side of the ball, as you look back, it just got progressively worse. And that's really where their problem was. But offensively, once they figured out what Drew Stanton could do as a runner, you go back to the 04 game at Michigan. I have wondered this. Do things turn out differently for John L. if they don't blow a 27-10 lead in Ann Arbor with about 6.5 minutes left? Because that's a huge, huge game. It's a recruiting game. And also, by the way, that's a game that would have put them in position to actually fight for the Big Ten championship, and they had it, and they blew it. And you could look at that moment as a big one, but it was also, it kind of went along with the theme of, for all the things their offense was doing, and it was doing very good things in 04 and in 05. Remember, they were top 10, and they were Stanton. They were, they were playing Michigan, a huge game. Like, their offense was a problem. But defensively, it just seemed to get worse and worse under Chris Smealan, the defensive coordinator.
Yeah, that overtime game was a great day for me because I watched overtime in an emergency room because I sliced my hand open carving a pumpkin back in 7th grade. So you talk about an all-time day for yours truly over here. It was just awesome. But no one cares about my stories. Let's talk about, like, when did it all turn south? Because, listen, Stanton's first year, 5-7, not great, but that offense was clicking. And then the following year after, 05, they start 4-0, ranked 11th, but just like you said, gut punch, loss in overtime to Michigan again. And then the infamous game at Ohio State when he sends 10 people out for the field goal. And kids are playing their tails off, but the coaches are screwing it up. Like, is that where the tide started to turn that, maybe this isn't going to go well? Or was it even after that, before that? What do you remember from the consensus of,
Yeah, it's a good question because you could pick some different points out. Yeah, look, I mean, they are destroying people early in the 05 season. And again, the Michigan game happens. They lose in overtime. Really a game that they absolutely could have won. They had a bad start to that game, but they're right there. And again, Michigan can't deal with their offense. But, again, it's the two sides of the ball just got further and further apart. Yes, the Ohio State game, you have to look at that because they were dominating that football game. And
they look good.
Just a devastating mistake. You're talking about, and I'm trying to remember now because the specifics, but you're talking about, I think, possibly going up 17 at the half, and all of a sudden you're up 7. Is that or
was it?
Something like correct. That. It was, and they blow that game. I think one thing that you did see though, kind of consistently, is that the depth wasn't there, which isn't all that surprising. But you saw late season fades. You saw that in 05 to 6. But honestly, I would still say that John L., although there was a lot, Joel Ferguson was not happy. A lot of fans weren't happy going into the 06 season. There were people talking about John L.'s job. But that team goes to a pretty good Pittsburgh team, destroys them on the road. Javon Ringer is a spectacular player. At that point, he's a sophomore. Stanton as a senior. Again, offensively, they're blowing Notre Dame out. I mean, if you really want to go to like where it really just the game is the Notre Dame game, because again, what if they win that game? Right. I don't think they have a spectacular season because again, their defense proved to be so bad that year. But you know what? I also think that so much of the will of that team was sucked out that night in Spartan Stadium, up 37-17. If I'm right, by the way, Matt, I mean, I'm pulling these scores out of my, out of the cobwebs. I think that's right though. 37-17, and they lost 38-37. I think that's right.
The big number is that they were up 16 with 8 minutes and 8 seconds left in the fourth.
Is that right? Okay.
Yeah, and I'm sure they're up 37-17, but like that's what I remember is that it was still a 16-point lead with 8 minutes left. And also this is what I remember too. Like I remember watching on TV and the wind was a big thing. And it was like, okay, go to the fourth quarter. MSU is going to go into the wind. And then they cut back from commercial and the wind shifted. It's like, oh my God, like there is a God after all. Like stars are aligning here. How can they lose this game? They won't. It's not possible for them to lose this game. And then of course we know how it ends. And this is so irrational, but this is on the Mount Rushmore of worst losses as a state fan. And it's not like it cost him a national title or a bowl game bid or a Final Four if you want to cross sports. That still is one of the top 4 losses I've ever witnessed as an MSU fan. I don't think I spoke until 4:30 p.m. the next day. I was like a Tibetan monk, just trying to make sense of everything that happened after that game. I was furious, but for the whole fan base and me, that's where it just completely bottomed out, flatlined.
Yeah, because then the next week they have Illinois at home, and I remember Illinois at that time was bottom of the Big Ten. Now that was Juice Williams, and they were actually about to start getting good, but they were bad, and they came into Spartan Stadium, dead crowd, dead Michigan State team, terrible loss, and it's the way the team played the rest of the way. They played like a team that knew its coach was getting fired. I mean, that's just, and even with Stanton, he did all he could, but even the offense really started to break down. The defense was atrocious, and they go to Michigan. And, for the most part, I know Michigan State's won 10 of 14 now, but even back then when Michigan dominated the series, most of the games were competitive. You could usually count on a competitive game. You'd have the occasional Michigan blowout, but this was there was no reason to play the game kind of game, in a rivalry game. So then you go to the next week, and it's Ohio State coming into Spartan Stadium, and I go to Tigers A's the day before, playoff game, and then I'm like, I can't believe I have to cover freaking Michigan State, Ohio State. Maglio just hit a home run. I'm watching the press box, but because you knew it was going to be name your score, Ohio State. Very little formation, and it was an Ohio State home game. I mean, They just came in and got $5 tickets. So it was dead. And so I think ultimately they didn't recruit well enough, which is usually what happens. But especially they just couldn't find difference makers, and they couldn't put their players in a good position to be successful at all on defense. The defensive side of the ball was just so bad. And I think there was some good coaching. You think about Jim McElwain, you think about Doug Nussmeier, Dave Baldwin. I thought was a pretty good OC. There was some good stuff happening on the offensive side of the ball, but ultimately they got betrayed, and then it all broke down.
Sure. And I want to put a bow on this really quick in the next segment, because I know we're going up on time, and thanks a lot for being gracious with your time. This has been awesome, recounting everything, but really quick, just got to talk to the fine folks about what's in my hand right now. That is a Built Bar, and I don't like to exaggerate. I don't like hyperbole, but this has literally changed me physically, spiritually, and mentally. Built Puffs are the best tasting protein bar of all time. Now, the normal Built Bars are fantastic too, and birthday cake is my favorite flavor of theirs. And now they got birthday cake Built Puffs. It is fantastic. Let's bang out some stats right now. Just 150 calories, a whopping 16 grams of protein, and 9 grams of sugar. That's it for the best tasting bar you will ever have. Not even protein bar. I'm also talking candy bar too. Go get yourself some, try some. You will not regret it. Your body will thank you for it, and your taste buds are going to sing like a choir of angels when you eat it. And also, your wallet's going to thank you too when you smash in promo code LOCKED15 when you order your Built Bars on Built.com. One more time. That's Built.com. Promo code LOCKED15 to get your Built Bars. It's over. November 1st rolls around, and it is determined in the 2006 season, I should specify, that John L. You ain't coming back. But he actually does come back to coach out the rest of the season. Why was that? Was he asked to do that? Was that just from the kindness of his heart? Or why did he stick around to see out the end of that season, even though it was determined with some season left that we're going to get a U-Haul for you, John. This is over.
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't have a great answer for that. I don't have a great recollection of it. Was a very strange situation. I remember the press conference, and John L., he's like, and we're going to win at the end. It's like, he's still trying to pump them up. We're going to finish strong. And usually what you have is the head coach gets fired, and then you elevate the interim coach. And we saw this down here where I am at Tennessee. You got to see some more wonderful Brady Hoke coaching a few years ago when Butch Jones got fired. Usually fine. The rest of the stuff, you obviously you got a staff in place. You have these kids playing football. You have games on the schedule. The show has to go on, but usually you don't see the head coach do that. I don't know. I mean, maybe he was given the choice and he just said, "No, I want to see this through with everybody." But it was strange. I remember another thing that really stands out was that day they had a big press conference in the Clarabelle Smith Academic Center, and it was John L. I'm fired, but come on, but I remember that they brought Drew Stanton in to talk about the situation, and mostly it was hey, I love Coach. I mean, it was we appreciate, but then they someone asked him about the next coach, what, and I remember I'll never forget this quote because I never forget the reaction from John Lewandowski, then the SID, because he did this double take. But Stanton was well, we need a coach who can find Grand Rapids without a roadmap. And it was whoa, but I think Drew Stanton, I think he actually mentioned Pat Shurmur too. He also was advocating for someone with Michigan State ties, but so I don't think that he was trying to rip John L. or trying to rip the staff, but he was talking about a very real thing, which was sure. They didn't make the inroads in recruiting. I mean, look, I think you see this with a lot of staffs is that everybody's got to recruit. And if you got some dead wood on the staff, and especially as time went on, he had some good assistants who moved on. He didn't replace them well. Things can go south on you in a hurry. Another thing I want to mention, Matt, is that, that last year, John L. would not answer my questions. He would not
go on.
Yeah, he would not answer Todd Schultz's questions too. Okay. And I bring this up because honestly, I would love someday to sit down with John L. and just shoot the shit with him because I really like John L. Did a story on his wife, Diana, who at the time had a very grave cancer diagnosis and and it had kind of a miraculous, battling of the cancer. And it's a good family. He's a good guy. Things kind of went sideways going into the 06 season. A couple things. One, a story I did about his job being in potentially in jeopardy. And there was a thing he said in the story about a drunken fan who had popped off at him at an alumni event that he didn't realize was going to be in the story, which, he was wrong in how he took it, but I could have communicated better back then. So I feel bad about that. And also I wrote a story for the opener for game day in the Lansing State Journal. And the story was a blowout guide. Okay. A fan's guide to a blowout, which I thought was a good idea. Basically, like if you're watching your team play a crappy team, obviously, like you can't take away like the line domination, right? But what things can you actually, So, but he was so pissed about that. I remember after the game, and actually, I think it was Montana, and they only won like 24-12 or something like that.
Okay.
Like, I don't know who would in the Daily Bugle's going to say it's going to be a blowout. He was so mad. So anyway, eventually, like he just would not. Like one of us, and Todd wrote critical columns. I don't know if there was a specific thing with Todd. Todd wrote critical columns. I mean, about him. He was pissed about it. But we'd ask the question back, next. Burkett. Okay. Yeah. Nope. I mean, he was totally out. And eventually it's like you stop wasting everybody's time. So it's just like, all right, you guys ask the questions. And, I did ask him a question after the 1,000,000-3 loss at Indiana. Which is like some of the worst college football defense I've ever seen played. And that was the game, I want to say, that was the week after the biggest comeback ever, by the way, in 06.
I wanted to get to that in a little bit. Yeah.
Incredible.
Yeah. That was going to be like the last thing I wanted to ask about, because listen, the last 20, 25 minutes have not been glowing of John L. Smith, but by all accounts, at least from the outside looking in, seemed like a nice guy, maybe even borderline misunderstood. I never thought he was like a jackass or anything. So let's set off into the sunset with maybe his greatest moment as a MSU coach is that, they're down 38-3 in the middle of the third quarter. I remember me and my dad were TV shopping because the game was essentially over. And then we're checking his BlackBerry every 5 minutes. Like, are they doing this? Like, what was the scene like after the game? Did it give maybe a revamp? Like, hey, maybe this isn't over, or was the writing already on the wall at that point?
It was incredible because I swear to you, like every single person who covered that team and the columnists from Detroit, all of us who were in the press box that day were writing the John L. epitaph. I mean, really, we were writing the obit on John L.
Yeah.
Okay. And then this happens, and it's just, I mean, they're getting destroyed. Maybe that was the score. It was 37-17. No, they were down 31. Anyway, it was the biggest at that
35,
time.
Yeah.
Okay, there you go. Yeah, 38-3. That's what it was, or whatever. Yeah.
A big score.
Yes, exactly. And it's this incredible comeback. So one thing I'll never forget about that is, so at Northwestern, you kind of have to wait outside like the visitor locker room. And sometimes it's like you're inside, you're in a concourse or whatever, you're not around people. Well, this is outside. And so all of the parents were there. And they knew who we were. And there was some, as frankly, probably thrown at Todd more than, because Todd was probably the most consistently this guy's got to be fired.
Sure.
And there was definitely some, what do you think now, Todd? Just, maybe you guys should stop being so negative. And it's like, all right, well, a good win, but I don't know that this is going to go. I mean, basically, it was okay, so let's delay it. And that's exactly what happened. The next week they go get just absolutely eviscerated Indiana. And then 2 days after that, they fire him. So, I mean, basically it put it off for another week, the firing of Donald Smith. But what an incredible thing to throw in the middle of all this, and it was amazing. I mean, their performance and coming Stanton and these, I mean, it was, it's been fun to revisit some of this. There was some really interesting stuff. And you know what? You're right about John L. John L's a good guy, and he was a pretty good coach.
Sure.
Staff is so huge, and that was definitely one of his things.
Great lesson. Yeah, no doubt about it, is that the staff carries you pretty far. He brought a good one. He did not replace well, and you got to be ready to do that. And recruiting, you can always do more. They didn't do enough. I totally forgot about that Drew Stanton quote. I completely forgot about the Grand Rapids on a roadmap one. That's a golden one. And all these have been fantastic stories. Can't thank you enough for hopping on. I know we're over on time, so super thank you for being generous with your time here. Unless there's anything about the John L. Smith era, I think we covered a ton right there. So can't thank you enough. East Lansing misses you. Spartan Nation misses you. But hey, good to see you're doing well.
Yeah, man. Hey, I by the way, I drank this. I don't know why. I just thought like a Diet Mountain Dew. A Mountain Dew would be like John. I just feel like John L's probably had some Mountain Dews, right, in his life.
Yeah, definitely.
And yeah, I'll be up more. Now I'm an MSU dad. We actually were at the Michigan game last year, tailgating, which was pretty awesome. But that was a pretty good game to go to. Yeah. But yeah, I'll be around. So, if any of you up there, you need someone to buy you beer. No, not me. No, not me. But if
I'll buy one for you.
I may need you to buy my kid beer. So yeah, we'll talk.
Sure, why not? Or if he has a taste for some cinnamon whiskey, I got a good connection right there for some sweet Fireball, which always tastes well on a fall Saturday in East Lansing. But hey, Until then, Joe, can't thank you enough. This was awesome. Hope you enjoy the rest of your week, the rest of your summer. This is part 2 of the Memory Lane series, and who better to talk to than Joe Rexrode about John L. Smith? What an experience that was. Thanks a lot, Joe.
Thanks, Matt. Appreciate it, man.